to argue, to beg, but the words caught in his throat. He was just a broken man in a small apartment with no money, no family, and no power. What right did he have to fight? And yet, as he looked at Melody, her eyes wide with fear, her small hand gripping the edge of the couch, something inside him snapped. He had lost one family. He couldn't lose this chance at another. "Then give me the process," Nathan said, his voice firm for the first time in years. "Tell me what I need to do. Tests, background checks, anything. I'll do it. Just don't take her away tonight." The woman studied him for a long moment. There was something in Nathan's eyes. Desperation, yes, but also sincerity. A raw love that couldn't be faked. Finally, she nodded. "We'll need to arrange a hearing. If the court believes you can provide stability, you may be granted temporary fostering rights." Relief and terror collided in Nathan's chest. It wasn't a promise, but it was a chance. Melody's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, Nathan's house felt alive with hope, with fear, with the fragile beginnings of something that might finally last. And as the officials left, leaving papers and instructions behind, Nathan sat beside Melody and whispered, "I'm not letting you go, not if I can help it. You're not alone anymore." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest Nathan had ever faced, but also the most meaningful. For the first time in years, he had a reason to wake up each morning with purpose. Melody was no longer just a frightened child he had found on Christmas Eve. She had become the center of his world. Every day was a test. Social workers visited often, checking the conditions of the small apartment, evaluating Nathan's ability to provide care. At first, Nathan worried they would see only his shortcomings. The cracked paint on the walls, the frayed carpet, the thin fridge that rarely had more than basic groceries. But what they didn't expect to find was the way Melody's face lit up when Nathan read her bedtime stories, the way she clung to his hand on walks, the way laughter filled the apartment where silence used to live. Nathan knew he couldn't rely on love alone to prove himself. He worked extra shifts, picking up odd jobs, painting fences, repairing roofs, anything that could bring in a little more money. Exhaustion clung to him, but when he saw Melody's smile as she proudly showed him the picture she drew at school, the tiredness melted away. For the first time in years, Nathan wasn't just surviving. He was living. The court hearing finally came. Nathan sat nervously in the wooden chair, Melody's small hand tucked in his. The judge, a stern woman with sharp glasses, looked over the file. She asked him difficult questions about his finances, his stability, his ability to provide a safe home. Nathan didn't sugarcoat the truth. He admitted he wasn't wealthy, admitted that life had been cruel to him. But then his voice steadied. "I may not have much," he said firmly, "but I know what it means to lose everything. I know what it means to be alone, and I will never let her feel that way again. I can't promise riches, but I can promise love, safety, and a home that won't abandon her." For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Then the judge leaned back, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Given the circumstances, and after reviewing the evidence of his commitment, the court grants temporary fostering rights to Mr. Nathan Hayes. Further review will take place in 6 months." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't permanent, not yet, but it was hope. Melody squeezed his hand so tightly he felt his heart swell with a joy he hadn't known in years. Those 6 months became a journey of transformation. Nathan learned how to balance bills more carefully, how to cook proper meals, how to make Melody's small bedroom warm and welcoming. He painted the walls a soft yellow, bought second-hand curtains with little flowers on them, and hung fairy lights across the headboard. Melody decorated the space with her drawings, filling it with colors brighter than Nathan had ever imagined possible. Slowly, the house began to change. It wasn't just a place of survival anymore, it was becoming a home. Christmas came again, and this time, it was nothing like the ones Nathan had endured in silence. He and Melody decorated a small tree together, stringing popcorn garlands and laughing when the lights tangled. For dinner, they cooked a simple meal, but it was shared with laughter, not loneliness. And when Melody handed him a small handmade card that said, "Thank you for being my family," Nathan felt the ache in his heart heal just a little more. Months passed, and the final adoption hearing arrived. Nathan stood once again before the judge, Melody by his side. This time, his confidence was steadier. He had proven not just to the system, but to himself that he could be the father she needed. He had shown up for every school meeting, Every doctor's appointment, every bedtime story. He hadn't missed a single moment. The judge looked down at her papers, then back at Nathan and Melody. After careful review, this court grants full adoption rights. Melody is hereby recognized as the daughter of Mr. Nathan Hayes. Tears blurred Nathan's vision. He turned to Melody, who was beaming up at him, her eyes shining with a joy he had never seen before. He pulled her into his arms, whispering, "You're my daughter now. Forever." For Nathan, it wasn't just about gaining a child. It was about regaining his own life, his purpose, his reason to keep going. For Melody, it was about finding the family she had always dreamed of, the family who stayed. That Christmas, their home glowed with warmth. Neighbors who once barely noticed Nathan now stopped by with cookies, drawn by the sound of laughter spilling out of his apartment. For the first time, Nathan didn't dread the holidays. He embraced them because he no longer faced them alone. And so their story became a living reminder of something powerful. Family isn't always the people we're born into. Sometimes family is the people who choose us, who stay when everyone else leaves, who fight to keep us safe even when the world says they can't. Because on that cold Christmas Eve, Nathan thought he was saving a little girl from the trash, but in truth she had saved him too. And so, that's how a lonely single father and a little girl who had lost everything found each other on the coldest night of the year. What began as a simple act of kindness turned into a bond stronger than blood, a love that built a family where there had once been only emptiness. But now, let me ask you something. What would you have done if you were Nathan? Would you have walked past that little girl searching through the trash, or would you have stopped, even when you had nothing to give? It's easy to think that kindness only matters when it's grand or expensive. But sometimes the smallest choices, offering food, opening your heart, showing compassion, can change the entire course of someone's life. For Melody, that one night rewrote her future forever. And for Nathan, it gave him back something he thought he had lost forever: hope, love, and a reason to keep living. Stories like this remind us of something powerful, that miracles don't always come wrapped in ribbons or under Christmas trees. Sometimes they come in the form of people who decide to care when they don't have to. So if this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Do you believe kindness can truly change a life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your words mean more than you know. If you felt the emotions in Nathan and Melody's journey, don't forget to tap the like button. It helps this story reach more people who might need this reminder today. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories that show the power of love, resilience, and hope. Together, we're building a community that believes in something bigger than ourselves, that no one is truly alone, and that kindness is the greatest gift we can give. So as you go about your day, remember Nathan and Melody's story. Remember that family isn't always about blood, but about love. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you see someone who looks like they've been forgotten by the world, you'll be the person who chooses to see them, to care, and to change everything with a single act of kindness. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this journey. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of love. What would you do if, on Christmas Eve, while families gathered around warm fires and children opened gifts, you saw a little girl digging through the trash for food? Most of us would stop, shocked, maybe even uncomfortable, but not everyone would act. For Nathan Hayes, a single father carrying years of grief and loneliness, that one moment in the cold changed everything. Nathan wasn't a man who believed in miracles anymore. Once he had a wife he adored and dreams of a happy family. But those dreams were buried the day tragedy struck. Christmas especially was the hardest time of year for him. While others celebrated joy and togetherness, Nathan spent the season alone, his apartment quiet, his heart heavier than he dared to admit. That night, as snow fell gently against the silent streets, Nathan thought it would be just another evening to endure. But fate had other plans. In the shadows near an overflowing dumpster, he saw her, a little girl no more than 7, wrapped in a tattered coat far too thin for the freezing night. Her small hands dug through discarded bags, pulling out scraps of food with a desperation no child should ever know. Nathan's breath caught. Who was she? Why was she alone, out in the cold, on a night meant for warmth and family? He could have turned away, convincing himself it wasn't his problem. But in that instant, as the child's frightened eyes met his, Nathan knew something deep inside him had awakened. That single encounter would unravel a story of pain, hope, and unexpected family, a story that would change both their lives forever. The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that cut through layers of clothing and found its way into the bones. Christmas lights twinkled faintly in windows across the street. But here, in the forgotten corner of town, silence hung heavy. The distant sound of carols and laughter felt like echoes from another world, a world Nathan hadn't been part of in years. He stood still for a moment, his breath forming clouds in the air, watching the little girl by the trash bin. Her coat was torn, the sleeves far too short for her arms, and her shoes, if they could be called that, were nothing but worn fabric barely holding together. She clutched a piece of stale bread she had pulled from the bag, her tiny fingers trembling not just from the cold but from hunger. Nathan's first instinct was hesitation. He didn't know her. What if approaching scared her away? What if she thought he was dangerous? And yet he couldn't take his eyes off her. He remembered all too well what it felt like to be desperate, to have the world turn its back. His heart pounded as he took a cautious step forward. The girl noticed him instantly. Her wide eyes flashed with panic, and like a startled bird, she tried to run, but her small legs could barely carry her on the icy pavement. She stumbled, the bread falling from her hands, and she looked back at him with a mixture of fear and defiance. Nathan froze, raising his hand slightly as if to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he whispered into the night, though his voice trembled with emotion. "I won't hurt you." She shook her head, her messy hair falling across her face, and pressed her back against the wall as though bracing for danger. Nathan's chest ached at the sight. This was a child, fragile, cold, and utterly alone, yet carrying herself with the guardedness of someone who had seen too much of life's cruelty. He took another step, careful not to startle her. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was she? Where were her parents? Why was she alone on Christmas Eve, digging through trash like a stray animal? The world outside seemed to vanish, leaving only Nathan, the little girl, and the unspoken weight of their broken lives crossing paths under the dim glow of a street lamp. And in that moment, one thing became clear: this wasn't a chance encounter. Something larger was unfolding, and Nathan's life was about to change in ways he never imagined. Nathan stood there in the freezing night, staring at the frightened little girl, and in her trembling form he saw a reflection of his own broken past. Her hollow eyes were the same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Eyes that had witnessed loss, struggle, and the kind of loneliness that gnaws away at a soul. Years ago, Christmas had meant something very different to him. He used to wake up to the smell of cookies baking, his wife humming carols as she decorated their small but cozy home. She was the kind of woman who could turn even the darkest winter into a season of warmth. They were expecting a child, a baby girl who was supposed to be born just before Christmas. Nathan would spend hours imagining himself holding her, whispering stories of hope, promising to protect her from the harshness of the world. But fate was cruel. An accident took both his wife and their unborn daughter from him in a single night. The joy he had been preparing for was ripped away, leaving him with nothing but silence. That December, Christmas lights felt mocking, carols became unbearable, and every snowflake reminded him of the life he lost. From that day on, Nathan never saw Christmas as a time of celebration, only as a painful reminder of everything he had been robbed of. The years that followed were unforgiving. Without his wife's support, Nathan's world crumbled. He struggled to keep his job, juggling bills that piled higher each month. He lived in a small, run-down apartment where the walls were thin, the heating barely worked, and loneliness filled every corner. Neighbors came and went, families gathered together, but Nathan remained an island of silence in a world that seemed to move on without him. He tried at first to rebuild. He attended grief counseling, worked long hours, and told himself things would get better. But depression has a way of stealing even the smallest victories. Eventually, Nathan found himself barely surviving, each day blurring into the next. His heart had hardened, not out of choice, but as a shield against the constant ache of missing what could never return. And yet, despite the weight he carried, there was still a quiet gentleness about him. He was the type of man who would hold the door open for strangers, who would share his last few coins with someone on the street, even when he himself had nothing left to spare. The world had taken so much from him, but it had never taken away his compassion. Still, Christmas was his weakest point. Every year when the lights went up around town, Nathan shut himself indoors, trying to drown out the sounds of laughter and cheer. He would heat up a cheap frozen meal, sit in silence, and tell himself it was just another day. But deep down, the loneliness of the holiday season cut deeper than anything else. As he stood now, watching the little girl shiver by the trash, all those buried feelings resurfaced. Her thin frame, her desperation, her silent plea for help. It struck him harder than he expected. She reminded him of the daughter he never got to hold, of the family he once dreamed of the promise he had made long ago to protect and love a child. Nathan clenched his fist in his pockets, torn between fear and instinct. He was struggling to pay rent, barely managing to keep food on his own table. Taking responsibility for anyone else felt impossible, and yet as he looked at the girl, something stirred within him, a voice he hadn't heard in years. Don't walk away. Don't let her suffer the way you've suffered. Do something. Nathan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of both his past and his present pressing down on him. He knew what it meant to be forgotten by the world. He knew what it meant to ache for love and find none. And maybe, just maybe, fate had brought this child to him for a reason. The icy wind cut through him, but Nathan hardly noticed anymore. In that moment, his struggles, his grief, and his years of loneliness all merged into one undeniable truth. Sometimes life puts the broken together so they can heal each other. The next morning, Nathan woke to the sound of knocking on his door. Not the hesitant tap of a neighbor, not the scratching of branches against the window, but firm official knocks that carried weight. His stomach sank. He had a feeling he knew what this was about. When he opened the door, two figures stood there. One was a woman in a long coat, her clipboard pressed tightly against her chest. The other was a man with a stern expression, clearly used to being obeyed. Social services. Nathan's first instinct was panic. He turned his head slightly, and there was Melody, peeking nervously from behind the couch. Her eyes widened, and she clutched the blanket Nathan had given her as though it were a shield. "Good morning," the woman said politely but firmly. "We've had a report of a child without guardianship staying here. May we come in?" Nathan hesitated. Every fiber of his being screamed to protect Melody, to shield her from the cold, bureaucratic world that had already failed her too many times. But refusing would only make things worse. So reluctantly, he stepped aside. The officials entered, their eyes scanning the small apartment. The man's gaze fell on Melody, and his tone softened just slightly. "Sweetheart, are you Melody?" She nodded, trembling. "We need to talk with you," the woman said kindly. "It's not safe for a little girl to be without proper guardians. You understand, don't you?" Nathan felt his chest tighten. Melody looked at him, her eyes pleading. She didn't have to speak, her fear said everything. She didn't want to go, and Nathan realized in that instant that he didn't want her to go either. "Wait," he blurted, stepping forward. "She's not just some child off the street. She's a part of my home now. I can take care of her." The officials exchanged glances. The woman sighed. "Sir, we understand your concern, but fostering or adopting a child requires a process. You can't simply decide overnight." Nathan's heart pounded. He wanted